Like that?
I was starting to lie and I was starting to act out. I stopped caring.
Let me play my part.
Check 2, hey.
Like, is that real? Did that happen? Like,
The structure of your brain actually changes.
and do you still feel that every day?
And then it got time for guitars.
Eating disorder, like
I didn't want to die,
tendencies.
but I didn't want to live.
Helpless little girl.
You gotta go in the hospital.
You feel powerless because the body has a fear reaction.
The opportunity to empower.
No one can take away my power.
I won't take myself out.
Artists that are true like that, those are the ones that tend to
Addiction.
create change.
We talked a little bit earlier about like the human capacity to cope, and like the double-edged sword with trauma is not only does it give you more than a person can cope with, but it also takes away some of that ability to cope at the same time. It's like shutting down someone's water while you're burning their house down. Like, what a time to lose the fucking water. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about, did what happened to you take away or adjust some of your ability to cope with just regular, you know, the horrors of life, losing a friend, grief,
Right.
any kind of life stress,
Yeah.
you know?
I think the best way is to tell you what happened and to explain to the audience, and because it all ties into what you're saying, and it all starts with developing a brain. First, I came to Minnesota when I was 5 years old with a single mom who came over from Winnipeg, and she came with some friends, her best friend and their family. We stayed with them till my mom could get her own apartment. All the while, my mother was working 2 jobs just to support me, and she wasn't able to be around a lot. But she wasn't around. She wasn't gone 15 hours a day, but nevertheless. So her parents were passed away from cancer pretty much back to back. My father, who they divorced at 3, I was 3, had disowned his family, Jewish family, for his own reasons, and became isolated, and basically the demons that surrounded him had a lot to feed on, and he allowed that, and he became a very mean person. I watched this completely loving guy at one point go from that to the meanest, coldest person you've ever seen, and very book smart, very righteous in the sense of equality for people, but at the same time, that he was not supportive of my mother, and my mother was by herself. She comes from a big family where there was a mother's mother, grandmother, everybody was in the house. So at this time I'm watching death. I'm being moved around the country and watching people struggle. And I think that cemented a memory for me. I remember my mom always was very affectionate, always showed love, had a great moral compass, lots of character, met the wrong people in her life. And nevertheless, the incident happened. To be honest with you, I'm a harder time placing an exact age, either 6 or 7. I know I was in like Carter onesie pajamas when it first happened. I remember saying, no, stop, no, stop. And I was forced, I was overwhelmed. And the second time, and it went all the way, if we need to say penetration yet. But it went to the limit. And it continued. And continued to the point where, and I was told I would be hurt if I said anything, and I never said anything. My mom's, I think there was, the first time I thought I said anything, I was 17, but my mom reminded me of a time I did tell her on earlier than that. And I'm not sure what was done about it. I think she had a hard time digesting the whole thing herself. I love my mom dearly, but I don't think it's fair to speak for her, so I won't. And there was a lot of things going on with me at this time. At the time it happened, I was already, and I don't know if I started doing this before or after, but I was starting to lie and I was starting to act out. I was starting to take things from department stores. I stopped caring. Something flipped, snapped.
But you don't remember if it was...
I don't remember if it was before or after, but I do know that I was already losing trust in my role models. And the teachers around me at school, kids were malicious. I was bullied constantly. I went through all those things that kids go through. And I became a bully, trying to fit in.
You did.
Oh, yeah. There was a couple, I just thought about this the other day, actually, about a kid that I hurt physically that was trying to be my friend. And I'm trying to link roots to some of my issues. And I was maybe second grade, third grade when I did this. And how often can we say, oh, we didn't know any better? I don't know. But that was weird. These are certain weird things that I did that, weren't all that different from other kids I'd see. But bottom line, I'm not thinking about these other kids. I'm thinking about me. So it was all right around the same time, though. This is where I can't put the timeline quite together. I suppose if I really wanted to give it some thought, I could, because I remember when I started acting out, certain instances.
Did you feel like the bullying piece was more an anger thing or more a fitting in thing?
Both. But does it even have some semblances like when the guy pushes the girl because he likes her? You know how regular you hear about that all the time growing up,
Little
which
kids.
is weird.
Yeah.
So was I just part of it being a little kid? Part of it was anger. Part of it, I'm sure to some degree. That I haven't microscoped yet.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I was just wondering if
That's a
you
great
saw
question.
other people
Great
doing
question.
it and were like, well, maybe all these people have friends and they're a little bit rougher and they push people around, they throw their weight around. I wonder what would happen if I did that. Would I have more friends? I don't know.
Well, you hit upon something very important. And this is the hardest part for me to swallow. And I really hope it helps other people out to admit it out loud. But with the sexual abuse, I was so insecure and I had what's the term that they use now when they make you so aware of your own problems that you think it's all your fault? Gaslighting? Is that the proper term?
Gaslighting is eroding another person's reality. Like if someone had said to you, if you had a disclosure experience where someone said to you, that's not what happened. Remember you watched a movie? Really, right before you went to sleep, you watched
Basically
a movie
telling
with
you're
that in it,
crazy,
and
yeah.
now it's a fake memory in your head. Yeah, they tell you you're crazy.
Well, I had something similar. Those
Really?
were the kind of similar thought patterns. I wouldn't say it would be gaslighting then, but it was at least unhealthy like that, where it was my thoughts to myself were, I would be called names by my babysitter. I'd be completely like, you come from a problem family. You're a problem for us to be. You're lucky we're babysitting you. That's what I would hear.
After they did that to you, they said you're
after.
lucky that
the
they
guy
were
hit
in
me
there.
with a ruler so hard on my back he broke the ruler. Classic things where I was like, why is this happening to me? I know my parents never gave him permission to hit me physically. Now don't get me wrong, folks. I probably did a few things in my life that I probably deserved, to be shaken and put the fear of, retribution put in me, but nobody deserves violence.
Within the regular frame of discipline,
Right.
You don't break a physical object on a kid's
Right,
back.
and especially, it wasn't even your own kid. It's just, not that would matter anyway, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one. But so the hardest part for me to swallow, and I'm kind of trying to blurt this one ahead just to kind of put it out there, was I was so insecure, wanted to be liked so bad that I actually started to accept the abuse as while I'm being liked. Now, dancers or gentlemen that work at gentlemen's clubs, I ask you, is that what you feel? When you're up there, that you're being liked and that, hey, at least I'm being touched or at least someone's showing me attention?
Or she's just paying the bills.
Or be just paying the bills. Now I use that because I have worked at a dance club for a number of years, and
Did you see some of that psychology?
Oh,
There's at least I'm getting attention.
I saw a lot of the stigmas, and I would not that I was always a good guy. Don't get me wrong, but at least more than half the time we'd just talk, and I'd try to work out my own stuff with them.
Well, when you say you weren't a good guy, I mean you didn't you never did anything like you forcing
I'm
yourself
just talking
on a
about
girl.
doing drugs. No, I'm just talking about doing drugs
okay.
with girls and the things that happen in that environment. Not any different than a lot of people, but I wasn't that bad guy that would take advantage of an abused woman and then exploit it. And I did see a lot of that, and hence why I don't work in those environments any longer.
Yeah.
And the weirdest part about it is I felt when I was working at Sex World and when I was working at Rick's Cabaret, that I was one of them.
Yeah.
And I felt like I could be more myself. That didn't always work out exactly. It actually worked against me because I like to do drugs. Oh. And when I'm on drugs, I'm never myself.
That's interesting. I wonder if I've never been on a mind-altering substance except I had my teeth out and they gave me Percocet. It wasn't interesting. I only fell asleep. So I always wonder, do people in an altered state, do they think that they're being more authentic because the inhibitions are gone? Do they feel that that's the genuine, this is really what life feels like because now my inhibitions are gone? I don't know how they feel.
I can answer that for myself. Great question. What was the time in my life? So the deal with cocaine, ecstasies on another level is your brain basically quits making the chemical that makes you feel happy or pleasurable. You've already replaced it with this chemical. But when that chemical wears off, the cocaine, your brain doesn't start making the actual chemical that makes you feel better, so you become depressed. And what would happen with that is I would feel pain. And it would force me to feel pain. And it would force me to think about all the things I don't want to think about because I'm coming down and feeling terribly sorry for myself. And I'm feeling like a shitty person. Well, that's when I started doing flowcharts. Well, why don't we just think about all the bad stuff that happened to me? And I started doing that. And when I was drinking, to come down and to circumvent the pain of my brain not making. And also I was embarrassed. I'm sitting there in front of friends, basically coming down like I'm an infant.
Yeah.
I'm coming down like what you see junkies. I was a junkie.
Yeah.
And I was coming down, but to answer your question, part of it, I would deal with coming down by making myself feel the pain then. I would turn it around, flip the script. And I'd well, why don't you think about everything bad that happened to you now that you're thinking about other stuff? Instead of thinking about trying to get more, let's think about, because that's not going to happen. Why don't we think about all the bad stuff? Where did it start? You're going to spend 8 hours staying up, staring at the TV, hoping to fall asleep. Why don't we? I used to do these huge paper flow charts of
physically
all,
with a pen.
and I put dates and years of when the abuse started, and when my mom got a divorce, and when I started acting out. I used to make timelines, and I would do this all the way up until that point. So yeah, there's some degree of. Not necessarily in the way that you would put it where I'd feel better, but I'd force myself to feel pain.
I was going to ask, were you doing that to punish yourself or were you doing that to find some answers?
Well,
because people can get addicted to hurting themselves.
Yeah,
right?
I got addicted to the drama. Basically, as long as I was, I would have a ritualistic of feeling pain of how the ritual would go. When I was doing drugs, I'd come down, then I'd go through that freak out period, then I'd feel this pain, then I'd go through this, and I'd go through that. And as long as I was going through that constantly, I never had to deal with myself. Once you get to zero, now I'm at that point of dealing with, which is myself, which we come full cycle to. But back then, yeah, absolutely, I would immerse myself into drama, and so I didn't have to deal with anything, which in the end created more issues.
It wasn't really introspection in a therapeutic sense, or it was
redundant.
Just, yeah,
super redundant. Thinking that I was being psychologically smart, thinking I was making the most out of this coming down. I mean, I did learn a lot. Don't get me wrong, I did, because your brain is running at a very high speed at that point.
On cocaine.
Yeah, on these types of drugs I was doing. However, in the end, I created more mass and more denial and more blocks. And I break bridges emotionally in my brain because I was still not being me. I was still being an idea of somebody, or, we were saying break down inhibitions. Well, yeah, in certain, in certain, the women I would date, I would break down inhibitions. Then I wouldn't have to play a chess game to be physical. I would
say whatever you want to them.
or
right?
as long I was always a nice guy. It was, believe it or not, worked against me half the time.
I hear about that.
Yeah, and it worked against me. But again, it comes down to different psychological patterns people have. Some people find it easier to be with a guy that they can't really attach to. If you're a little meaner, then they can just forget about it. Or, that other person might be dealing with some other things too, and they tend to get drawn to, but I'm not here to speak for them anyway.
Did you have an easier time connecting, maybe not on a deep, profound level, but just superficially connecting with a woman when you were more of a jerk?
No.
I'm trying to pick up on what you just said.
Okay. If I was a little meaner, arrogance can come across as confidence. And I think that there's this, ultimately in the end of the day, I'm the hunter and women are the nurse, right? And I'm talking about in the bar that I worked at. I'm talking about the bar goers, big drinkers, that lifestyle. I'm not talking about everybody here, but I can only speak about my experiences. And I'm not saying general experiences as an out clause. I used to. I say, generally speaking. That would be my out clause, so I won't get pigeonholed. Or yes, I am compartmentalizing a little bit. However, we're all flawed up. Let's put it that way, flawed up. That's not even a word, but we're all.
I like that. We're all flawed up.
and so if I was my mom decided to try to raise the perfect gentleman. And that didn't work for me either in this part. But I had to realize, and before I go on with this, that I wanted to be liked by everybody. I wanted approval by everybody. So I tried to become everything to everybody. And I was insecure enough. I was selling the man that they wanted as opposed to being the man that they wanted for my relationships. And that's, while I created an aesthetic of awesomeness, the safety that, I date women, so I can only speak with women. The safety the woman wanted from that strong guy wasn't there. So I became a wild card. But to answer your question about if I would have been more of a jerk, yeah, I definitely would have been able to do the dance with no pants a little bit more. But in the end, what came across as confidence was arrogance, and arrogance doesn't last. And neither does it with me, because I never believed it in myself anyway.
Yeah.
Being the fact that I was a musician with long hair, and I had a certain look, and I was a bartender. I had more opportunity come my way. But on the other side, you heard me say something about, well, if a woman gets attracted to somebody who's a jerk, then if things don't work out, there's really not that much of attachment going on. I'd see that a lot. I would hear that a lot. I even had a woman turn me down, going, I really like you, and that's the problem. And I'm like, whoa. And this was like a woman who works as a, what do you call that word, natural childbirth doula? A doula or something? She's a
midwife?
Yeah, but there's another word, doula or something. Anyway, she was in this perfectly healthy kind of midwife kind of person, or helping people. I mean, this girl had all the paperwork perfect. But it got, again, confusing.
Yeah.
So which person should I be? And I never wanted, and some things are by design. I hate to say how you show up at the office, how you show up on a date, how you show up here. But if you start being somebody you're not, and the hardest part about that was I didn't even know who I was. Am I Josh the Rocker? Am I Josh this? Just become somebody, and I became Josh the Wild Card.
Yeah.
But I can't answer what their intention was. I can only speak about what I've been told. I mean, I guess, or that I've experienced, and I've seen a lot of confusing behavior on both sides where I'm like, how do I act? And I think that becomes harder on men and women, particularly trauma survivors, of which person are we going to allow you to see? Which person is safe for you to see? And how much trust do I put in? Because I've got, for me, and I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but if I hear the word abandoned one more time, that's when I start feeling weak. And that's not the right way to feel. It's just a word. But I feel like, I was watching this movie called Bulletproof Monk yesterday. It was an okay movie, but it has some great messages. And part of it is this guy lost his family, so he says, fine, I'll be one without. I'll be okay. I'll be my own family. And that was his coping mechanism. But he was pickpocketing other people and was okay with that until he met a monk who guided him towards his true destiny. Mm-hmm. So I think what I took away from that is our true destinies get confused and altered by some of these everyday realities we're dealing with. And the reality of it is there's a lot of animals out there that masquerade as human beings, because we are, first of all, mammals. Second, a lot of these people have really bad childhoods and really, a perpetrator is a perpetrator. You're either racist or you're not. Either you're a perpetrator or you're a perpetrator. I have at this time, though, tried to have a bit of understanding to the psychological part. I don't know if it's helping me to forgive or help me to understand, but I do think about where are they coming from and how were they raised, such as a racist person who's been drip-fed Fox News all his life. He's never had the opportunity, nor has he, and I think this is where that word privilege comes in, been forced to have to step out of his own shoes.
There goes my chance to get a Fox News anchor on this show.
Sorry about that. But
my big goal,
know, right?
My big goal is just vanished in the air.
Oh, my
No, that
goodness.
makes a lot of sense. When you said a minute ago, what version of myself am I going to let someone see? It's so true. If you're a person who wakes up and you just wonder, the first thing your eyes open, you wonder, like, how am I going to face this day? It's hard to know what face to put on, because you can't wait until you're ready to go out there and face the world. You have to work when it's time to start working.
Yeah.
You work when the clock hits, and if you're not ready, like you said, act as if, but sometimes acting as if can be like, I call it a false face to the world, or sometimes I might call it like an avatar, but you put on this fake face like things are basically okay.
Oh, I remember what the AA had taught me before, is that a lot of times you may not believe what you're doing, but you got to keep doing it till it becomes you.
If it's positive.
If it's positive. Osmosis. Hanging around certain people who are positive that you can learn from, who, as they said in Star Trek, I feel like I watch a lot of Big Bang Theory. It's okay for you to like it too. These relationships very well can define who we actually are through these friendships. But yeah, it can be very taxing to try to, and I think this is where, and I reach out, and part of the reason I'm doing this program is because it can become taxing enough where we don't want to live anymore.
Yeah. And
I'm doing this because I feel I won't take myself out, but there have been many moments, and I think there still will be more, where I'm just like, this is too much. This is too much. And I have to really search for the worth or a purpose. Or I'll just have to say, hey, that window is gone. I accept that. But what window is here? What am I supposed to be doing? And in the end, it just keeps saying to myself, well, you're supposed to be helping people. And that's what brings me on the program.
As someone who's been to the edge, you and I have had a lot of conversations when we were in darker times, and because of your past and things that you were facing just after Cal passed, right when we met, I felt like if I was in a really dark space, I could call you and not be judged. I could call you and be like, man, this is like, have you thought about it today? And you'd be like, yeah, I think about it every day, but I'm not going to clock out.
Yeah.
We could call and go there with each other.
Yeah.
For someone who maybe is listening to this tonight and doesn't have someone that they can go there with, what do you suggest for people who are facing that choice right now? Do I continue or not?
Well, that's, thank God we can edit this.
Did I just put you on the spot?
No, I'm trying. This is also like, I would say it's a hard one. Because people already know they can. People, you can always call. There's those hotlines, and
Yeah.
it's like how do I get the energy to pick up the phone to call the hotline? And I think the best thing I can offer is remember the times people gave you a hug, or the times people said they loved you, or try to remember any of those good times. Trying to remember the people that you thought didn't like you. Try to remember the good things they said about you. I remember I said something very hurtful to my mom, and I was just devastated. I still am devastated by what I said. And we don't have a standard stock relationship in terms of how we talk to each other. Sometimes it's not respectful, mother to son, son to mother. It's just person to person. It was an odd relationship. And I apologized for it, and I made sure I was the first person to call back, and that was hard to say, "I'm sorry, are you okay?" And I would do that to myself. I would pretend to call myself and say, "I'm sorry. Are you okay?" And I'd have a conversation with myself. Now, granted, for some people this may not be so healthy, but remember the times people said they loved you. Remember the moments, not that, that make you happy, but also the things, and what I'm trying to do is get the emotions to calm down. Is whatever it takes to get that emotions to calm down. However, because if I don't do that for myself, I'm going to start thinking of ways to hurt myself. It's either going to be thinking of good things or thinking of bad things. The problems come when we can't stop the obsession or the compulsion. And that's something, I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, is where to put the stop signs. Stop signs is sort of like obsessing. If you start obsessing about something for longer than a minute, you need to put a mental stop sign in there. However you do it, railroad stop sign, a visual. That's what I did anyway. And I forced myself to think about something else, or I'd pray to whatever spirit or God you have. Just start, doing something else, because then I'm going to start obsessing and spiraling. And, you're either going to spiral or you're going to do the work to not spiral, but it's going to be work either way. And that's for anybody going through that, where it's hard to even pick up the phone or hard to even think good thoughts. You have my love and my empathy, because I go to this day, I still go through that. Yeah. On my best days, everything's worth it.
Sure.
On the hardest days, there's a part. Let me back up a second. I think, and other people I imagine can relate to this, that I'm always having my old self, my addict self, my wanting to free the ambitions, actually medicate, make it all go away. It's always in competition. That's why there is no cure about my addictions or alcoholism. Because it's still fighting. It's fighting. Now, the religious zealots might say, well, that's the devil just doing jumping jacks, waiting for you to get weak. Well, I don't like to use the words weak too much anymore, or strong, or being the fierce warrior. Some people say keeping it real. For us trauma survivors, sometimes it's very difficult keeping things real. Yeah. So that's, doing something good for yourself. I mean, I've been there. I've been that depressed person where I couldn't get out of bed. Slept 15, 16, 18 hours till my back hurt so bad, or I had to go to the bathroom. I had to get up. So I can relate. It's not like I'm reading out of a textbook about this stuff, or, Russell Crowe movie. That's what I do. my mom. So to talk about, I had to call and apologize to my mom. My mom straight up said, "Sweetie, that's okay, because I've said some really hurtful things to my mom, and she's not here to apologize to." And I still think about it. But I remember the love that she gave me as a way of knowing I'm okay. And so I guess I'll take her advice on that, of just remembering the love someone showed you, and that you're okay. It's not necessarily going to make you feel whole or better, but can we get you through that moment? You know, like Alcohol Anonymous says, talk about 24 hours. Get through the 24 hours.
Yeah.
Get through it. And you know, because I remember all our conversations. Just let's get you through the 24 hours. It's baby steps, you know, for anybody. And last but not least, if you have the ability to watch The Inch Speech by Al Pacino from Any Given Sunday.
Yeah.
There is, and it's something my best friend who passed turned me on to. And it's a speech. They're football players, and Al Pacino's the coach, and he talks about an inch speech, and basically it's trusting your teammates around you, and that together. Now your teammate you might be by yourself. You might not have a teammate, but you're crawling for inches, and those inches turn into yards. Those yards turn into. Now that's for the time where it's for being a warrior. That's not for every time, but there is a time, especially for me, to get into the shower and get from the bed to the shower, to the breakfast, to all the regular things that's going to give me the option for a healthy day. Mm-hmm. Those are crawling for inches. That's what I mean by that. And then there's another football statement, and I don't even watch football, but I've got some great stuff. And one of it is in this movie called The Replacements. And I think this is where it becomes, I think a lot about with your question of like, what's your advice to somebody feeling in a very similar situation? That situation I call quicksand. And what that is again, the coach is looking at the team and saying, what's your fear? And the quarterback answers quicksand. And everybody's like, oh, you feel like you're going to die in the desert? No. That means like when you're on the football field and you make a play and it doesn't go right. And the harder that you try, the worse it gets until everything's in slow motion and you're going into quicksand. I feel that way like half the day, every day. And it's a coping mechanism, and sometimes I can just get through it, like throwing myself just into work. As you know, I haven't talked to too many people lately. I'm just going to throw myself into work. Well, that didn't work out so good for me because now I burnt myself out and got all angry about things. It actually worked against me.
You said that's been coming up for you lately.
Yeah,
the anger piece.
I blew up at work a couple times. Didn't do so well. Embarrassed myself. Acted like a little kid. So now I have to reevaluate that. Brings me right. Boy, I'll still shake things up just like before I go down for the count. I'm going to shake it up and then force myself into a situation I have to take care of. Yeah. And it is a big deal, but it isn't comparatively to what I've done in my past. And so I'm just going to suck it up, but I'm going to be honest about it.
You had that phrase that I like so much that you were saying. I was like, I don't know, I was asking you something like, what's the biggest difference since you've been sober so long? And you said something along the lines of, the biggest difference, well, you say it.
Well, the statement goes that some people will change their behavior to meet their goals. Such as, for example, if you have a night job or an overnight job, you get enough sleep during the day that you can stay awake for your job at night. Or if you have something that is physically, it's very hard physically, then you get in better shape to be able to handle the job. Or you eat better. And another person will change their behavior change their goals to meet their behavior. Such as when I would do narcotics, I would only work night jobs because that was when I was awake. And so that's been a big difference for me, is changing my behavior to meet my goals. Or if I start doing the opposite of that, changing my goals to meet my behavior, then taking a good hard look at what's going on with that. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense to me. That phrase makes me think about so many situations and people differently. Yeah. Because you can, once you think in those terms, you can start to think about it with just about everyone, not in a judgmental way, but just like with this person's life be easier if they didn't lower their goals and their aspirations to meet the way they tend to behave,
Right.
and what can I do differently? Yeah, I always thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, it starts in combination with like coping mechanisms too. How I cope with emotions and how I cope with everyday trials and tribulations. Understanding that the world isn't always fair. The miracle is when it is fair.
Yeah.
And that it's also helped me to weed out, or another term of trim away the fat and get right to the heart of things, where I'm going to, for example, if I'm feeling like I have low self-esteem that day, maybe I won't try to do anything beyond my scope because I'm not feeling like I either deserve it or that I can handle it. And I start spiraling that way with those kind of thoughts, as opposed to, it's like if I'm feeling like I need to change some behavior, like why am I watching action movies at 3 a.m, knowing full well that's going to affect my sleep, and knowing full well that I have to be up at 8:30 in the morning. Why am I doing this? What's going on? What I get afraid of is justifying bad behaviors with maybe I'm resentful, or I'm maybe I'm getting resentful. Usually stems from some part of the ego, and I feel stronger if I'm turning the unhealthy behaviors onto something or somebody else, and I start making those stronger in me, that I feel justified for acting the way I'm acting or feeling the way I'm feeling, instead of turning the hard microscope, the truth, onto what's going on with me. Becomes the world. It isn't the world's responsibility to adapt to me. Then again, it becomes really hard to figure out where do I adapt to, and I feel good about as well.
Yeah.
And finding my place in things, but that's my responsibility. And if one is at a point where they're having a hard time with that, we really need to seek an outside source to help circumvent that, supervise it. That was the whole thing behind these programs that I was involved in, is for accountability, supervision. Before I make a decision on my own, I check with somebody. And that still to this day becomes daunting, because I never really chose to do that when I was young, because I chose not to trust anybody's opinion. Nor did I want the hard truth either.
You talked a lot in the last hour about justifying different behaviors. I want to flip that around a little bit, because a lot of people talk about the shame aspect of being a survivor, and that it might take them years to feel like they deserve to get better. Do you feel you can justify success in your life, hope, joy, being a happy person, contentment? Can you justify that, or do you feel like there are parts of yourself that maybe are deliberately hold you back, like the anger or whatever?
Interesting you bring that up. It's something I've thought about. Maybe not in that exact process. I have a hard time using the word believe, because it feels like I'm selling myself on something that may or may not be real. But there are times I need to have conviction in something. If I'm putting out positive energy, if I'm putting out love, it'll start to surround myself and draw me to those, and draw people to that, and draw me to those people. And if I start thinking negative things, I'm going to draw to people with the same behaviors. So when we talk in terms of the question of justifying success, that is how I look at it. Is if I've chose to put out, I use it as the trickle-down process. If I'm feeling positive, I'll have a trickle-down process to someone else. Maybe that person will want something.
Like a water ripple effect.
Yeah,
kind of
water
thing.
ripple effect.
Yeah.
And people will maybe want that, or to surround myself. I've had friends call and go, I needed a little dose of Joshua today. And that was different than back in the day when people would wonder, God, if I hang out with this guy, will I even be in town for the next 3 days, or am I going to be okay? You know, am I going to be able to go back to work on Monday?
Well, that must feel good that you know that you're someone else's inspiration.
Absolutely. That means everything to me, and it gives me that semblance of validity and that idea that of a purpose. It justifies having some good things in my life. Those good things a lot of times are tools or a conduit, such as I have a drums. You know, when I play drums, I create music. Well, I can create music on this table, or I can create music over here. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but if I have something nice in my life, do I feel like I deserve that? If the means to the end is of something positive, yes. And then that justifies it, the intent. Then it feels real. It feels honest and real and that tangible. But these things that create that environment of emotion and of well-being is what I'm putting out, I get back in. You know, we talk about definition of insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I find that to have a truth, but I also find that, you know, when we find something that does work, then that repetition does matter. And the discipline to keep the repetition is what becomes very, very difficult, is that discipline. And that's what I found the hard part with it, not only emotionally, but physically, the discipline. You know, when I've hit rock bottom in the past is when I've become the most disciplined. I sit in enough pain, I become disciplined because I don't want to sit in that pain any longer. But my threshold, what we talked about earlier, of pain is pretty large.
Yeah.
And it's become, now at this age, it's become unbearable.
Was there a time when you were using that pain was felt like a safe place for you?
Mm-hmm.
Just
Absolutely.
so familiar.
So familiar. That's what I deserved. That's what I was avoiding. I'd bring on tenfold, and then just, you know, that was a big part. It's a big cycle.
If you had the opportunity to speak to someone who has had an experience disclosing what's happened to them, and maybe it wasn't a good experience, maybe like you said, 10 years later, they got up the guts and they said it to someone, and it was maybe greeted with shame, blame, denial, something like that. If you had a chance to speak to someone like that right now, what do you have to say to them?
Not everyone's like that. I've made many choices in my life of sharing things with people, and it worked opposite for me, to the point where it's like, why even try? All right, and then I started, because it's easier to just compartmentalize everybody into one category and to not trust. It's harder on our bodies, but I think it's easier in the beginning, much harder in the end, because it reminds me of the person that just gives with no expectation of getting back. But once that person is hurt, they have no idea other than just to go completely cold. And it hurts that person worse than anything, because it's not who they are. And that's where it gets me, is I wasn't built for, you know, in the beginning, I was built for love, and I was built for, and I think that it comes from my mom, so much affection, there's so much struggle, but so much affection. Mm-hmm. And I didn't close off that affection, and I didn't close off the ability to soak that in and to digest that, which makes being negative very confusing, and it doesn't give it the strength I want. It doesn't give the negativity the strength I want to be able to remain in denial completely. Yeah. I was like one step in, one step out. So the only thing I can think about is that if I at least act as if and stay positive, I'll create the energies around me to stay positive, and at least I won't have total negativity come my way or walk my way into it without seeing it. I mean, there's things in life that are uncontrollable, and that's where not control issues. I'm sure that I'm not the only person with them because of what we've went through. where we need to control our environment around us. And the minute we start feeling out of control, it reminds us of all the other stuff that was out of control. And it gets weird. It gets really weird.
So last question, and then after this you can say whatever you feel like saying. I'll just open it up for you.
Sure.
What does 50-year-old Joshua have to say to 8-year-old Joshua?
I love you. Just plainly, I love you. And sorry that happened. And you didn't deserve any of that. Yeah. You know, you didn't at all. You know, we weren't born in this life for that type of behavior to happen to us, so that we became the people we did. And thank God we were good people to begin with. You're a good person. That's what I would say back. You're a good person.
That's amazing, because so many people go to a point of, if I knew then what I know now, and they go to a point of judgment or pointing the finger or don't get on drugs or don't this or don't that, instead of you just went immediately to acceptance and love.
Yeah.
Heals a lot of things, doesn't it?
It sure does. And not everybody gets the opportunity to discover the most beautiful parts about themselves, because we get so caught up in dealing with the therapeutic and the other part that we have to remember. One, I have to remember to, as I'm rebuilding and rewiring, to capitalize on the strengths, accept the limitations, to digest, to deal with what we can as opposed to what we can't. Mm-hmm. And the rest, we just have to have faith. Have faith.
Yeah.
I'm not always talking to, whatever that means to that person, to have faith. And that becomes, I know, really hard for all of us to do, but it's a necessary part of what we have to deal with. That's for sure.
Well, I am amazingly grateful that you've been on the program and given me so many hours of your time now to talk about this stuff that I think you had mentioned you hadn't maybe talked about it with a ton of people.
Not at all. I think you're probably the fifth person.
Well, thank you for everything and all your volunteering with the Kelly Nicole Foundation and believing that there could be such thing as a music-based philanthropic organization. I know there's still some people looking at me like, but I don't get it. What are you trying to do? And I'm like, just hang in there. You'll get it.
Yeah, I think it's like the sense side to the grasshopper. It's like, that's wisdom.
Yeah.
Is some things won't be clear for a long, long time. And, have faith in the process that's good for you.
Yeah.
And that some things hopefully will clear up, or something better will come in its place that will make things clear. And everybody has their own process. And I wanted to say thank you to you, not only for the beautiful friendship that happened out of tragedy, mm-hmm. And that I had the opportunity to be on this program and to continue the work that you've started, and that I just, as I've once said when we first met, and I know those things come down. It's like, well, he's saying all the right bumper sticker propaganda to make me feel better, but I meant everything that I said, and I still do that. That Kelly's watching down on this is not because we're not on our own, but we're still living entities on this physical planet of this earth. Mm-hmm. We're still in our physical bodies. Would be very proud and relieved to know that it's going this way, and to be so proud of what you're doing. It's required an amazing amount of strength to know your background, to know the tenacity and the warrior spirit you have, to be rebuilding. And so it's as much of an honor for me to be here to share my past, and I hope it helps other people, or people can make sense of it and digest it to their own situation, and to let everybody else know that I love you, and that you are loved. You are so loved.
Well, that's amazing. I've met a few people since we started this whole thing who knew her years and years and years ago and didn't find out until after. And I'm so grateful that you were able to even just see her for a day.
Oh, me too. Oh
You
my
know, I mean, you would have missed it by the skin of your teeth.
Yep.
You at least got to see her face one more time.
I think it was a Friday when I came over, and she passed with a listening party Saturday or Sunday.
Saturday we had the album finished. It was
Okay.
on a little flash drive.
Yeah.
Put it in the receiver, and then the next day she passed.
Yeah. I tell you
Just
what.
the timing is crazy of everything, the way it went down.
You know, it's interesting because, I mean, there's been people at a restaurant that I recognize that might be going through something, or they'll wear something, and I'll say, hey, you know, it looks like you're supporting some causes. Can I show you something? And I've literally had people eating lunch watching her documentary.
No way.
Yeah, and I said, if you're going to support something, I mean, if you're going out there, because there are some people just need to give money to something to feel good.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for that. You know, some people want to feel a part of something. Well, if you want something authentic and real and that you can hold and help people, this is the cause.
It's so interesting you say that, because when I drive you home right now, I have to come back here tonight and then write an email to someone of what does the Kelly Nicole Foundation do? Because I'm putting together another speaker program, a documentary screening, and then there'll be a panel. Oh. And we've got some people who are maybes, and they want to know, okay, but if people donate to the Kelly Nicole Foundation, what is it that you do? And it's like, it's not an easy answer, because I can't say, well, we gave $1 million to starving kids and just write it real quick and easy. I'm still trying to think how to put it into words. So if someone came to you right now, you're at that lunch with them, they look at the video, the documentary on YouTube, and they say, okay, what does the Kelly Nicole Foundation do? What does it mean to anyone? If you had to answer that, what would you say?
It's always interesting because my dad was a grant writer.
Yeah.
For a nonprofit organization. And so I was able to see he struggled with, how do I put this as a business?
Yeah.
And yet still remain the spiritual feeling behind it, and also the true endeavors. But also the people I'm approaching are used to reading templates of businesses. So how do I word this in a way that puts the full weight of the spirituality of the program, while still being able to get somebody's business mind to go, okay.
Right.
Because there are quite...
What is the value of the documentary? What is the value of someone with an eating disorder hearing her album for the first time and saying, you know what, I deserve to get better? You know, how do I put a value to that? How do I tell someone that's worth $100?
You know,
do you know what I mean?
There's been times where I've had to put things in a language that people will understand, and a lot of times it'll be like, I'm here to support with faith, hope, and love. But also, some of these things require a donation in order to have tangible products.
Like mics.
You know, to be able to record this podcast. Exactly. We need certain things to be able to, we need food to survive, and I need to go to work for that. Yeah. A lot of people that are dealing with this aren't able to even get out of bed to go to work. Mm-hmm. But they want help, and they want somebody to help support. So I ask for your personal help to be able to help support it. And, you know, if we get the message out to a lot of people and they choose to support that after they've heard the message of what we're doing, and the message is that you are loved.
But I just hope that, like, if people hear this podcast, that if they don't know, or they think they don't know anyone who's been touched by trauma, I hope that they think again and just kind of think twice and think before they laugh or joke about someone or something like that. You know, that they think, okay, wow, this really stays with a person for the rest of their life. It doesn't make them weak. It doesn't make them attention seekers. That maybe they just listen a little bit more. And again, I don't know how to put a value on that where someone should give us $150 because we're creating a space where someone feels like they have the right to heal. But I think that is worth money.
And ask somebody else to put with their value system to understand our value system, and hopefully it's on the same page. It reminds me of a lot of news reports I've been reading, and these are hard for me to read, where these reports are supporting males that are hurting females. Now, it's starting to talk a little bit more about the males that have gotten hurt, but we know there's a stigma behind this, and that's part of the reason I'm on here as well. Nevertheless, there's being weight and power given to, say, the people being hired on the Supreme Court and people that are being hired in a situation that can take these resources that can help people, and they're siding with people that are doing bad things.
Yeah.
At least that's what the news reports are saying. Now, I'm no expert.
Happen in front of all of our eyes.
And it's happening. And so what I ask is that, and that's why we're having to take it to the streets like we are, so to speak, is because the stigmas and are still just as strong. It's becoming really more out in the open than it has in the 50s, but nevertheless, it's very strong. I can attest to having a female roommate and a stalker, and I went out and talked to the stalker, and I called the police because he was so scary, and they turned it on to her, and they believed him.
Did he say they were
He
dating
was her
her
uncle.
Her uncle. Oh, that's gross.
I mean, it went down to like them questioning me and
That's
like
so easily disprovable.
oh, totally. And it's like, how much is going. First, we're dealing with stigmas of the society of a male-dominated society, okay. Then we're dealing with these old school stigmas that are now becoming our new school stigmas that are filtering over, and I think that unfortunately a lot of people are in denial of what happens at home, and some of these things get supported because of fear of being found out, a fear of like, I really made a wrong decision. There's a part in a great movie called The Boondock Saints, and at the very beginning, I'm going to make it real short on this. The pastor or priest is saying the only thing worse than a bad person doing evil is a good person who sees the evil and does nothing. Indifference. And that's what I'm starting to see people have really terribly, is indifference to it. Either I've got to deal with my own self, I don't have time for this, or this and that. That is why this program is needed, in a lot of ways. It's because we are not indifferent. We see it, we experience it, we have been going through it. We are on the front lines of trying to deal, of trying to help people. And, bottom line is, and between you and I, is people want to be involved in something. They just want to know it's real.
Yeah.
And they can have something to believe in. This is going out, and it's a big part of why I've come on the program after years of being silent about things. I think this is the longest I've ever talked about it.
Well, thank you. I know I've dragged you across the coals tonight.
You did. It was.
I think it's important that a guy talks about this, because there's a different piece to it when you're also having like your masculinity challenge, especially at the age that you did.
Talk about being emasculated to the highest form. As I mentioned in part one of our interview, if we caught this anyway, I was not raised to know right or wrong, like a man should be with a woman or a man should be with a man. My mom kind of just let me figure it out.
She kind of like peace and love in the big van. And
yeah, pretty much. And she was my dad would be the Martin Luther King. He was like, go out and kick some butt. If anybody, my dad, of the 4 times I met him, he was like, Josh, if anybody talks about anybody badly, they're talking about you, and you just turn around and swing. My mom's like,
I don't think Martin Luther King might have said that.
Well, back before he went to Mecca, it was
Malcolm. You're talking about
Malcolm X, yeah, not Martin Luther. Excuse me. My mom would be Martin Luther. My dad would have been
Martin
Malcolm.
Luther King, turn around and swing. It rhymes at least.
That would be the Malcolm before pre-Mecca, of course.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you for that correction. I'm taught. What is a man? What's masculine? I mean, these are things we know in society. Sensitivity, crying in public, all those kind of things that, plus, the magazines not only work against women, how you should look. You're too big, you're too small, you're too tall, you're too short. This isn't big enough. This is not big enough. Oh, my God. I mean, the things
Never
we do
ends.
to ourselves just to appear in public. Okay, let me even get further into it. There's something so deep in our subconscious has been built. That's why I call it DNA. That even though it's propaganda that's taught you that you should have a bigger chest as a woman, you still feel better. I had a woman break up with me because we were on the verge of we wanted to get married. And she goes, Josh, I grew up on a farm, which thank God she broke it off. But I grew up on a farm that a blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy is what I'm supposed to marry.
No way.
Yep. And even though you're the best candidate for me to get married to, I'll never feel right at home.
First of all, if someone calls you a candidate, that's the time to walk away.
Right. Well, I think I'm making that up. I think I'm embellishing on that one.
I was worried there.
Or I mean, for lack of remembering. But she was saying, you're the one.
Yeah.
You're obviously the one.
But you didn't
for
fit
me.
what she had been taught.
And not only that, but she's basing her approval on somebody who taught her hate. And so thank God you did break it off. But for me, because we would have gone through years of trying to, And so, her
what
family.
would your kids have dealt with if their grandparents were anti-Semitic?
Her family was more important, even though they taught her hate and her approval. But she was honest with me. She was. She goes, this approval that's in my head, I don't think it's healthy, but it's there. And I've dealt with this with other relationships.
Yeah.
And, it made it a lot easier to swallow that she was honest, at least with me. But my point being, do you see, even though she knew it was wrong, she still felt better with it. So am I here to? So I'm trying to pick my battles here of what I say is really bad or wrong or this with people or anything or judgments of anybody else or what they go through, because it can seem confusing. Here, that's wrong, but you're still feeling better with it.
Did you ever have an disclosure experience with someone you were dating?
Yes. Once, just one.
Yeah.
Just one. And her and I are still friends to this day. To this day. She was one. And I think that was my first real attempt to, this is a really good person in front of me, and there were some emotional things starting to happen. I later learned that it would have happened regardless of my trauma or not. Hard to say. That's something I'm still figuring out. However, she was somebody that I felt I needed to share more with. I wanted to go deeper. Mm-hmm. And she was the one person I always felt accepted me for who I am. I just felt it. It wasn't the words she said. It was the feeling I had.
Yeah.
A certain comfortability, and that goes back to what would you tell somebody that's having a hard time? I mean, think of the one person you feel the most comfortable with and call them and just say, I need to talk to you right now.
Right now.
Can you do it? And if not, is there a place I could wait for you, or something?
That's really good advice, because you feel like you're, people don't respect the urgency. Like when I was putting our website together, kellynicole.com,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for suicide resources, right? For people on the edge, and just to have a few things on the website. kellynicole.com/crisis is the part of our website that I'm talking about. And I wanted just a few resources, not over wordy, just quick. Here's a number, here's a link, quick. And then, and I saw in some of the suicide resources, it said 911, and I called someone who's a therapist and who deals with this for a living. I literally asked her, can you call 911 if you're suicidal? And she was like, yes! People don't know that. That's a human life in danger. How is that any different than if you saw someone had gotten run over by a truck? You'd call 911.
Absolutely.
But if your own life is in danger, I don't know if people think to do that, but that is a crisis resource.
People forget, ours may not look physical, but it truly should be treated the same, and it isn't.
Mental illness.
Mental and emotional illness is not, we're treated the same as a medical, as a physical, as something visible.
Yeah.
And that's ties into status. It ties into a lot of things I'm not real happy with. Yeah. And I think that's where we're getting back to the males coming out, because we're taught to be fix-it people, that we can't be showing weakness, how we're viewed, particularly the demographics that come from. I mean, not only did I live in the city, but I lived on a farm.
You did?
Oh, yeah, for 4 years. And I was told, you can't have a Thanksgiving turkey unless you kill this turkey.
Oh, Jesus.
I was forced to kill a turkey or not eat. Now, they still fed me? Probably. But can you imagine 3 guys laughing around a 12-year-old kid, telling him to kill something or you're not eating? And then, that's the mentality I'm dealing with, that I've dealt with. I felt like I was in a Stephen King book, escaping from there, and I got 1,000 zombies chasing me behind me.
It's like old school masculinity, right?
Right. That's where I get into that old DNA. And it's still just as prevalent, but now it's become a little more refined, so to speak. You know, a little
Between the lines.
between the lines, even hidden or conditional. Sure, you conditional. Yeah, you can be open and sensitive conditionally.
Wow.
You know.
Well, I think your voice in this interview is, you know, helping other people find theirs and helping other people have an alternative to that. If this happened to you, or if you go to talk about it, or say you want some resources to help put your mind back together, that you're less of a man or something, I think you're a good antidote to that in the way that you were able to speak out in the last couple hours.
Oh, well, thank you again for
Absolutely.
the opportunity, and for anybody out there that is struggling, going, I don't have the energy or the will to want to take myself out, but this is just too much work. I deal with that too, and sometimes a daily basis, even at 50, and I just want you to know that you're loved, and that it's so important that at least we that if I feel, now this isn't for everybody, but I feel that if I allow myself to get so rattled, say about racism, which I do, I can't even watch movies like that, or rape, I can't watch movies like that because I experienced that. That we need you. You're needed. You're not just loved, but you're needed on this earth. You're needed on this planet. You're wanted. You're needed. You're loved. Hey, if you know enough foods out there, GMO, are we going to learn to garden? Then maybe we should learn to garden together.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa.
Get the music behind the mission. Hate Becoming by Kelly Nicole on iTunes and Spotify.
If you guys haven't checked out the merch table,
join the movement.
buy the album.
Get your Kelly Nicole band merch and donate what you can at kellynicolefoundation.org.
Courage is from Amplified!